Survive one night beside me, Omega, and you're free. The Alpha King's wolf chose his mate. The moon hung low over the kingdom, casting silver light across the dense forests that surrounded the castle. Shadows moved with a life of their own, twisting and whispering in the wind. Within these woods, Lyra ran, her bare feet brushing against the cold earth, heart pounding like a drum. She had always been careful, always aware of the dangers of this world, but nothing had prepared her for the night when she would face the Alpha King himself. The story of Kale, the Alpha King, was whispered in every village. Tales of his strength, his ruthlessness, and his icy gaze were told to frighten children into obedience. Yet, for all his fearsome reputation, there was a loneliness hidden beneath the armor of his power. Some said it was because Kale had lost his mate long ago, leaving him with a heart hardened by grief. Others said the curse that clung to his bloodline would destroy any who dared love him fully. Lyra did not know the details, only that the Alpha King had chosen her, and there was no escaping that fate tonight. Lyra paused near the edge of a clearing, her breath shallow, misting in the chill night air. The forest seemed alive, every sound amplified, the snapping of twigs, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf. She could sense eyes watching her, and her instincts screamed that danger was close. Before she could react, the shadows shifted, and Kale appeared, as silent and commanding as a storm descending. Kale's presence was overwhelming. He moved like a shadow, tall and powerful, the silver moonlight catching on the dark fur draped across his shoulders, marking him as Alpha. His eyes were sharp, piercing, and when they fell upon Lyra, it was as if he could see into the deepest parts of her soul. She wanted to turn away, to flee, but something in his gaze rooted her to the spot. "You shouldn't have come alone, little Omega," Kale said, his voice low and commanding, carrying both danger and curiosity. Lyra swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. I had no choice," she whispered. "I didn't want anyone else to get hurt." Kale's eyes narrowed, studying her with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue. "Do you know what it means to be chosen?" he asked, taking a step closer. The air between them crackled with tension, a mix of fear and something she could not yet name. Lyra shook her head, but her heart betrayed her. Deep down, she knew she was at the mercy of this Alpha King, and yet she felt a strange pull toward him, as if the threads of fate had entwined them before either of them could resist. Without another word, Kale extended a hand. Hesitation warred within Lyra, but she had no strength left to run. She allowed herself to be guided through the forest toward the castle. Every step was heavy with silence, broken only by the whisper of wind and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The castle loomed ahead, dark and imposing, its spires clawing at the sky. Inside, the corridors were lined with ancient tapestries and statues of long-dead kings and queens. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls, moving almost as if alive. Kale led Lyra to a chamber that was both beautiful and cold, adorned with silver and deep blue, a place where every detail spoke of power and authority. "You will stay here tonight," Kale said, closing the door behind them. "One night. Survive it and you may leave. Fail and you will remain as long as I see fit." Lyra's pulse quickened, fear mingling with a strange sense of curiosity. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling but steady. Kale's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Refusal is unwise," he replied. But there was no anger in his voice, only a quiet challenge, a test of courage and will. Hours passed like a slow dream. Lyra explored the chamber cautiously, noticing details she had not seen before. The way the moonlight caught the silver edges of the curtains, the faint scent of herbs burned in a small corner, and the soft hum of wind through the castle walls. She felt watched, not only by Kale but by something older, something ancient that whispered through the stones themselves. Kale did not enter the room again until the storm broke outside. Rain lashed against the windows, lightning illuminating the chamber in sudden flashes. The sound of thunder made Lyra flinch, and she found herself staring at the doorway, expecting him to appear like a shadow from the storm. And appear he did. He moved with silent grace, stopping just inside the doorway. Rain dripped from his shoulders, dark hair plastered against his forehead. Yet even in this storm there was a stillness to him, an undeniable power that seemed to bend the room around him. "You are brave," Kale said, his voice soft but cutting through the storm. Not many survived the night without trembling. Lyra met his gaze, holding it even as her heart thumped wildly. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice was quieter than she wished. Kale tilted his head, studying her. "Not afraid or hiding your fear well?" he asked. His question was not a demand but a puzzle. Lyra felt as though he could read every thought, every heartbeat, every shadow of doubt and courage inside her. The hours stretched on. They spoke little, yet the silence between them was charged with unspoken words and emotions neither dared voice. Lyra learned the rhythm of Kale's presence, the way his shadow crossed the floor, the subtle tension in his posture, the rare moments when his mask of command slipped and he seemed almost human. And then came the whispers. Soft at first, like the rustle of leaves, then louder, almost urgent. They seemed to come from the walls, the floor, the very air itself. Lyra realized with a start that these were not ordinary sounds. They were echoes of the past, remnants of curses long held in the castle. She followed the whispers to a small alcove, hidden behind a tapestry. There, embedded in the stone, was a faintly glowing mark, etched in a language she could not read. The moment her fingers brushed it, a shiver ran through her, and she saw fleeting visions, shadows of past alphas, the faces of mates lost, the pain of choices that had rippled through generations. A sudden hand on her shoulder made her jump. Kale's eyes were fixed on her, sharp and unreadable. "Do not touch that," he said quietly, yet there was a flicker of something else, concern perhaps, or fear. Lyra pulled back, heart racing. I didn't know," she said. Kale's expression softened slightly, though the shadow of command never left him. "Some things are better left untouched until you understand them," he said. And in that moment, Lyra sensed a truth. Kale himself was bound by rules and regrets, a prisoner of his own power in ways she could not yet comprehend. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering against the windows, wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. Kale stood silently, watching Lyra, and for a fleeting moment she saw the weight of centuries in his eyes, the loneliness, the burden of command, and something deeper, a yearning for connection that he had not allowed himself in years. Hours turned into what felt like a lifetime. Lyra, exhausted, finally sank to the floor, leaning against the cold stone wall. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, and she allowed herself to imagine freedom, to imagine leaving this castle when dawn broke. But freedom was not yet hers. A sudden noise, like claws scraping against stone, echoed through the chamber. Lyra's eyes snapped open, and she saw Kale's form tense, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring. His gaze was fixed on the doorway, and the air seemed to thrum with invisible energy. "The night is not over," Kale said, voice low, almost a growl. "And neither is your trial." Lyra's pulse quickened. She had survived the journey to the castle, survived the first hours of the night, yet now she understood that this night held more than mere fear. It held secrets, dangers, and the first threads of a bond she could neither resist nor deny. Lightning struck outside, illuminating a shadow in the far corner of the room, one that did not belong to Kale, and one that made Lyra's blood run cold. The storm had brought more than rain. It had brought a presence, something ancient and watching, and the whispers of the castle grew louder, urgent. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the shadow, his eyes fierce and unwavering. "You will survive this night," he said. "If not, you will not leave this place at all." Lyra's heart raced, yet beneath the fear, a strange courage began to stir. She had faced danger before, but never like this. never with an alpha whose power pressed down on her like the weight of the sky, yet whose presence stirred something unnameable inside her. And then, as the first light of dawn threatened to break through the storm, Lyra noticed it, a hidden door, almost invisible in the shadow of the far wall. The whispers seemed to call to it, and she knew that behind that door lay secrets that could change everything. Before she could move, Cale's hand was on hers, stopping her. His gaze met hers, intense and unreadable. "Do not touch it," he warned. But there was a tremor in his voice, a crack in the armor of command, as if he feared what she might awaken. Lyra's pulse surged. She had survived one night beside the Alpha King, yet she realized that this night was only the beginning. The castle, the storm, and Cale himself held mysteries and dangers she could not yet understand. And somewhere deep inside, she sensed that the bond forming between them was as inevitable as the sunrise, powerful, dangerous, and utterly inescapable. The storm raged on, thunder shaking the castle walls. Outside, the forest whispered of secrets and curses, of power and destiny. Inside, Cale and Lyra stood at the edge of something neither fully understood. One night had passed, but the journey, and the danger, was far from over. And as the first ray of sunlight touched the castle, Lyra's hand brushed against the hidden door, and the whispers rose to a crescendo, warning her that nothing in this world was as simple as freedom. The night had tested her. The storm had tested them. But what awaited beyond that door could change everything. The castle was quiet after the storm, yet the silence felt heavy, as though it had been holding its breath. The rain had left the walls slick and glimmering, and puddles reflected the silver light of the moon. Lyra could feel it, the weight of history pressing down, the whispers of the walls, and the secret she had glimpsed in the hidden door. Cale did not speak as he led her through the castle corridors. His eyes, sharp and watchful, occasionally flicked toward her, as if gauging whether she would falter under the weight of the castle's secrets. She tried not to look nervous, but her heart still raced. Each step deeper into the castle felt like entering another world, a place where the past and present tangled like the roots of the ancient trees outside. "You have questions," Cale said finally, his voice low, breaking the silence without looking at her. Lyra nodded. "About the castle and about the door. And about you," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. Why was I chosen?" Cale's gaze darkened, not with anger but with memories that seemed to claw at him. "Being chosen is not always a gift," he said. "Sometimes it is a warning, sometimes it is a burden." Lyra's brow furrowed. "A burden for me or for you?" Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. "For both. You will understand soon enough." He paused, then glanced at her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "The castle, this kingdom, it holds more than walls and stones. It holds the echoes of those who came before, and some of them do not rest easily." Lyra shivered. Something about the way he said it made the air thick, almost electric. She could feel the pulse of the castle, as if it was alive and aware of their presence. Her hand itched to touch the hidden door again, to see what secrets lay behind it, but Cale's warning stayed her hand. Hours passed in tense quiet. Cale did not force her to sit or stay in one place, yet every move she made felt observed. She wandered the corridor, tracing her fingers along the cool stone walls, noticing the old marks and carvings. Symbols of wolves intertwined with crescent moons, warnings etched in ancient languages, reminders of past rulers and the power they held. Then she saw it again, the door. Its outline was subtle, almost invisible unless the light caught it just right. She stepped closer, heart pounding, and tried to imagine what lay beyond. And in that moment Cale's shadow fell across the door. "Do not touch it," he warned again, his voice low, firm. "Some doors are locked for a reason. Some secrets are dangerous." Lyra swallowed, realizing he was more afraid of what she might awaken than of herself. "Why?" she asked. "What's behind it?" Cale's jaw tightened. "It is not for you to know, not yet. It is tied to the curse that has haunted my family for generations." Those who dare meddle with it often do not survive. The word curse struck her like a blade. A curse, she echoed. On your family. Kale's eyes softened for a brief instant, then hardened again. Not just my family. All those who claim the blood of the Alpha are bound by it. It waits for the wrong choice, for the wrong mate, for the wrong moment. And when it awakens, it can destroy everything. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. The Alpha King she had met the night before was no longer just a figure of power and fear. He was a man haunted, struggling with forces he could not fully control. She realized that surviving the night beside him would be more than endurance. It would be a test of courage, trust, and understanding. Later, Kale moved to the chamber's hearth, tending the fire with careful precision. The flames reflected off his eyes, giving them a depth that was almost human, almost vulnerable. Lyra watched him, noticing the faint tremor in his hands as he adjusted the logs. "You carry a heavy burden," she said softly, unable to stop herself. Kale looked up, and for a moment the mask of the Alpha fell. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "more than you can imagine. And yet, even with this burden, I am bound by duty, bound to my people, to my pack, and to the choices I make." Lyra felt the tension between them grow, not in anger but in unspoken understanding. She had always thought of alphas as cruel, unfeeling rulers, yet Kale's eyes betrayed a struggle, a longing for something lost and possibly unattainable. "I don't understand it," she whispered. "The power, the curse, the rules. How do you carry it all without breaking?" Kale's expression darkened. "Some of us break quietly," he said, almost to himself. "And some of us break loudly, leaving scars that echo for generations. I have chosen to survive quietly until now." The storm outside had faded, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the occasional whisper of wind through the castle's stones. Lyra felt a strange connection to Kale, a mixture of fear and fascination. She realized that while he was feared by many, he was not invincible. He carried the weight of the past in a way that made him human, and that made him dangerous. Hours later, hunger gnawed at her, and Kale finally gestured toward a small table set with bread and fruit. She ate slowly, noting the precision of his movements, the careful way he maintained control over every corner of the castle and himself. "You are learning," Kale said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Not about the castle, but about yourself." Lyra looked up. "About myself." "You are stronger than you think," he said, "and braver than most who come before me. That is why you are still here." As she digested his words, a sudden movement caught her eye. Shadows shifted unnaturally across the far wall, moving in ways that seemed impossible. Lyra froze, and Kale's hand went to the hilt of a hidden dagger. His body tensed, ready to protect or attack. And for the first time, Lyra saw the full measure of his alpha instinct, sharp, precise, and utterly lethal. A low, almost whispered growl came from the shadows, and the air thickened. Lyra felt the pulse of the castle reacting, as if it were aware of an unseen presence intruding on their space. Kale moved forward, voice low but commanding. "Show yourself." The shadows stirred, and for a fleeting moment, Lyra saw the glimmer of a figure, pale, fleeting, and indistinct. Then it vanished, leaving only the echo of whispers that made her skin prickle. "What was that?" she asked, voice trembling. Kale did not answer immediately. He turned to her, eyes intense. "The past does not always rest," he said. "It lingers in places it should not, and sometimes it tests the living." Lyra's mind raced. She realized that the castle, Kale, and the hidden door were all intertwined with forces far older than either of them. Her presence here was no accident. She had been drawn into something vast, something dangerous, and something she could not yet comprehend. The night stretched on, and Kale finally allowed her a brief rest near the hearth. But sleep was uneasy, filled with shadows and whispers, with visions of past alphas and their mates. She dreamed of silver eyes watching from the forest, of chains broken and reforged, and of a wolf calling her name from the darkness. When she awoke, Kale was gone. In his place, a note lay by the fire, written in a precise, elegant hand. "The night is far from over. The storm of the past will return. Be ready." Lyra's heart leapt. The castle was alive with secrets, and Kale had only begun to reveal them. The hidden door waited, the shadows moved, and the curse whispered through the walls. She understood that surviving the night beside him was no longer a matter of endurance. It was a matter of courage, wit, and heart. Her eyes fell on the hidden door once more. She could feel it calling to her, urging her forward, whispering promises of answers she both feared and longed to know. She knew that if she opened it, nothing would ever be the same. The Alpha King's absence weighed on her, and yet the bond she felt with him, the strange, unnameable pull, grew stronger. She realized that Kale's story, his curse, and his heart were all intertwined with her own fate. And as the castle whispered around her, Lyra understood a truth that both terrified and thrilled her. The night was far from over, and the real test had only just begun. Outside, the forest waited. Inside, the castle's secrets stirred. And somewhere in the shadows, Kale watched, knowing that whatever came next would demand everything from both of them, their courage, their trust, and their hearts. The whispers rose again, urgent and clear. The past is not done. The curse is awake. And the Alpha's heart is not his alone. Lyra drew a deep breath, steeling herself. She would survive this night, and she would survive the nights to come. But even as she whispered her resolve to the empty chamber, she could not shake the feeling that the castle, Kale, and the hidden door had already chosen her. And when dawn came, nothing would be the same. The forest beyond the castle was alive with shadows and whispers. Every tree seemed older than time itself, gnarled roots twisting like veins beneath the soil, and the wind carried secrets that no human ear could fully understand. Lyra moved cautiously, her bare feet brushing against soft moss, every step guided by instinct. She had followed Kale's trail for hours, her heart both heavy with fear and filled with a strange determination. Kale had disappeared the night before, leaving her alone in the castle with only a note warning of the curse and the storms of the past. Lyra understood that this was no ordinary journey. This was a test of courage, of trust, and perhaps of the bond that had begun to stir between her and the Alpha King. The deeper she went, the stronger the pulse of the forest became. It was as if the land itself was alive, reacting to her presence. A distant howl echoed through the trees, and Lyra shivered, knowing it was not merely a wolf calling, it was a warning. Something ancient had awakened. Suddenly the trees parted, revealing Kale standing on a small rise, his figure silhouetted against the rising moon. He did not turn to face her immediately. Instead, he breathed deeply, as if listening to voices she could not hear. His dark fur glimmered in the moonlight, and for a moment he seemed more shadow than man. "Lyra," he said finally, his voice low but carrying across the clearing, "you should not have followed me." Lyra stepped forward, her hands trembling. "I could not stay behind. You disappeared, and I could not leave you alone." Kale's expression was unreadable, a mixture of warning, admiration, and something far older, grief perhaps, or longing. "The forest is not safe for you," he said. "There are things here older than my kingdom, older than my bloodline. They will test you, and they will not forgive mistakes." Lyra's gaze did not waver. "I can face them. I can face anything if it means I can understand you. I want to understand." For a moment, Kale did not respond. Then slowly he extended a hand, not as a command but as an invitation. "Come with me," he said. "But know this, the path you choose now will change everything. There is no turning back once you step deeper into the forest." Lyra took his hand, and together they moved deeper into the woods. The trees grew taller, darker, their branches entwining above to form a canopy that blocked the moonlight. Shadows shifted with every step, and the whispers of the castle seemed to follow them, mingling with the rustle of leaves. Kale led her to a secluded cabin, hidden in a clearing where the moonlight fell like silver rain. The cabin was simple, made of dark wood and stone, yet it radiated a strange warmth. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a fire burned inside, crackling and sending sparks into the night air. "This is where we will rest," Kale said. "The forest tests all who enter. Here you will be safe for now." Lyra nodded, but her eyes scanned the surrounding trees. She could feel the presence of the curse, the pulse of Kale's power, and something else, something that had not yet revealed itself. Inside the cabin, the air was warm, scented with herbs and wood smoke. Kale moved with careful precision, tending the fire and arranging the space as though it were a ritual. Lyra watched him, noticing the way his muscles moved beneath his fur, the tension that never fully left him, and the fleeting moments when his gaze softened in ways that made her chest ache. "You are not like the others," Kale said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Most who come before me fear, or they fight, or they flee. You endure, and yet you challenge me. That is dangerous." Lyra's lips parted, but she did not answer immediately. She realized he was speaking of more than the forest, more than the curse. He was speaking of them, of the bond that had begun to form, fragile yet undeniable. "Dangerous is not the same as unwilling," she said softly. "I do not fear you, and I do not run from what I feel or what I see in you." Kale's eyes darkened, a mixture of caution and something he had not allowed himself to feel in years, desire tempered by the weight of responsibility and regret. "Feelings are complicated," he said, "especially for someone like me. To love is to risk everything. To trust is to risk everything, and the curse, it will not forgive weakness." Lyra stepped closer. "Then let me help you carry it. You are not alone, Kale, not anymore." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Kale spoke, his voice softer, almost a whisper. "You do not understand what you are offering. My past, my mistakes, the blood of my family, it is not a burden I can easily share." Lyra reached out, her hand brushing against his. The moment their skin touched, a shiver ran through both of them, not of fear but of recognition, as if their souls had touched before. Kale's eyes widened, and for a fleeting second he allowed himself to be vulnerable. "You are brave and foolish," he said, though the sharpness of his tone was tempered by something else, a quiet awe. "The forest will not spare either of us if we are unprepared." As if on cue, the shadows outside the cabin grew longer, darker, and the wind carried a voice, a whisper of something older, something hungry. Lyra felt it first, a chill that ran down her spine, a warning that the forest had not welcomed them. Kale moved to the doorway, his body coiled like a spring, his senses alert to every sound. The firelight flickered across his face, illuminating the tension, the control, and the storm of emotions beneath. "Something approaches," he murmured. "Stay close. Do not speak. Do not move unless I command it." Lyra nodded, heart racing, as the first shadow stepped into the clearing. It was not human, yet not entirely beast, a form that seemed to shift like smoke, silver eyes glinting in the moonlight. It paused, observing, and Lyra realized with a start that it was testing them, as Kale had warned. Kale's stance shifted, muscles taut, and he let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through the cabin and the forest beyond. The shadow hissed, circling, yet it did not attack, not yet. Lyra could feel the pulse of the forest, the rhythm of the ancient magic that bound it, and she understood that this was a challenge not of strength, but of presence, trust, and unity. "You must trust me," Kale whispered, his hand brushing against hers again. "Trust the bond, or we will not survive this night." Lyra swallowed, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel the connection, the strange and unnameable pull toward him. The fear that had guided her steps melted into determination. She nodded, her grip firm on his hand, and together they faced the shadow. Time seemed to slow. The wind ceased, the trees held their breath, and the shadow moved closer. Then, as if recognizing something in Kale and Lyra, it paused, wavered, and finally dissipated into the mist, leaving only a faint whisper that lingered in the air. "The bond is recognized. The path is set. But the trial is not finished. Kale lowered his hand from hers, but the tension did not leave his body. The forest acknowledges our bond, he said quietly, but it is only the beginning. There is more to face and you must be ready. The curse is aware of us now. It will not forgive hesitation. Lyra's chest heaved, the adrenaline leaving her exhausted but resolute. Then I will not hesitate, she said firmly. I will face whatever comes with you. Kale's eyes softened, a rare moment of vulnerability showing through the mask of command. You are stronger than I expected, he said, and braver than most who have walked beside me. That is dangerous but perhaps necessary. Hours passed in tense quiet. Lyra and Kale spoke little, yet the silence was filled with unspoken words, with understanding and recognition, with the slow building of a connection that neither could ignore. Kale began to share fragments of his past, the mate he had lost, the battles he had fought, and the curse that had haunted his bloodline for generations. Lyra listened, her heart aching for him, her empathy bridging the gap between fear and understanding. I was broken, Kale admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. I thought I could endure alone. I thought I could survive without risking another heart, but you challenge that. You make me question everything I believed. Lyra reached for him, her hand resting on his arm, and for the first time, Kale allowed himself to lean into her presence. We are bound, he said softly, not by choice but by necessity. And yet, necessity does not feel like fate when you are near. The forest beyond the cabin stirred again, the night pressing closer, and Lyra knew their trial was far from over. But she also knew, with certainty, that whatever came next, she would face it beside him, heart and soul intertwined. And then, as the first rays of dawn threatened to touch the forest canopy, Kale's eyes darkened with a warning that froze her blood. I hear it, he said, voice tense. Something approaches from the shadows of the curse. We must move now. Lyra's heart leapt. The trial was not finished. The bond had begun, but the forest, the curse, and the legacy of the Alphas were far from forgiving. And as they stepped into the deeper woods, she realized that the journey ahead would demand everything from both of them: their courage, their trust, and their hearts. The wolf within Kale stirred, the Omega within Lyra awakened, and together they moved into the unknown, ready to face the shadows that had waited for them since time immemorial. The curse whispered, the forest watched, and the bond between them grew stronger, binding them together in ways neither could yet fully understand. And somewhere in the dark, the ancestral spirits of the Alpha line waited, knowing that the real test was only just beginning. The forest grew darker as Kale led Lyra through twisting paths only he seemed to know. Shadows clung to the trunks of ancient trees, and the wind whispered warnings that only he could hear. The pulse of the curse throbbed in the air, a steady rhythm that pulled at Kale's mind and heart alike. Lyra followed closely, trusting him entirely, even though her pulse raced with the knowledge that the final test awaited them. They reached a clearing at the edge of a cliff. Beyond it, the ruins of an ancient temple sprawled across the rocks, bathed in the silver light of a blood-red moon. The stones were worn and cracked, etched with runes older than any kingdom, older than the memory of the first Alpha. The air hummed with power, and Lyra could feel it pressing against her chest, a reminder that the forces at work were far greater than either of them. This is it, Kale said, his voice low but steady. The heart of the curse. Everything we face, it begins here. Lyra nodded, her hand brushing his. In that touch she felt strength, fear, and a strange comfort. The bond between them had grown in ways neither had anticipated. Trust had turned into something deeper, and fear had begun to turn into courage. They stepped into the ruins. Every step echoed across the stone floor, carrying whispers of the past. Shadows moved as though alive, circling around them, testing their resolve. Kale's eyes were sharp, alert, but his hand never left hers. Lyra knew that together they could withstand more than either could alone. At the center of the temple lay an altar, blackened and cracked. Its surface was etched with symbols that glowed faintly, reacting to Kale's presence. A shadow began to form above it, twisting into the shape of a figure, the spirit of the curse itself. Its eyes gleamed like fire, and its voice was like the wind through dry leaves, echoing across the ruins. "Kale," it hissed, "you dare bring another into the darkness. You cannot protect her. You will fail as your ancestors failed. The curse will consume all." Kale stepped forward, standing tall despite the weight of the threat. "I will not let it," he said, his voice unwavering. "This ends tonight. No longer will it control us, no longer will it take what I love." Lyra tightened her grip on his hand, feeling the pulse of his power, the wolf within him rising to meet the challenge. "We face it together," she said firmly. "I will not leave you. And you will not face it alone." The shadow twisted, coiling around them like smoke, testing their connection. It struck at Kale, sharp and relentless, trying to pierce the bond, trying to weaken his resolve. Lyra felt it too, a chill that pressed against her spirit, threatening to pull her into despair. But instead of fear, she reached out with her heart, sending warmth, trust, and courage into the link between them. Kale's growl rose, powerful and commanding. He shifted, wolf and man blending, eyes glowing silver as he met the spirit head-on. Lyra matched his courage, standing firm beside him, her energy flowing into the bond they shared. The curse recoiled at the strength of their unity, twisting violently but unable to break them. "Your power is nothing without trust," Lyra shouted, her voice carrying across the ruins. "We will not fall, not together," the shadow shrieked, a sound that shook the stones beneath their feet, then faltered. Kale stepped closer to the altar, his claws leaving faint marks on the stone. The runes glowed brighter, reacting to the strength of his will. Lyra placed her hand on the altar beside him, and the moment their fingers touched the stone together, a wave of energy coursed through them. Visions flashed before their eyes, the mistakes of past alphas, the heartbreak of lost mates, the destructive power of the curse. But amidst it all, there was a single thread of hope, a chance for redemption. Kale drew in a deep breath, grounding himself with Lyra's presence. "I am not my past," he roared, voice echoing like thunder. "I will not let it control me. I choose her. I choose life. I choose freedom." The shadow shrieked one last time, then shattered into silver mist that dissolved into the night. The curse's hold on the ruins was broken. The runes dimmed, the air stilled, and the forest exhaled, as if the world itself acknowledged the victory. Kale sank to his knees, exhaustion rippling through him, and Lyra knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "It's over," she whispered. "The curse, it's gone." Kale looked at her, eyes still glowing faintly with the remnants of his wolf energy. For the first time, he allowed himself to smile, not the sharp, commanding smile of an alpha, but a small, human smile. "It's over thanks to you." Lyra shook her head. "We did this together. You carried the power, but I carried the courage and the bond. That's what saved us." They rose together, and as they looked out over the cliff, the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, painting the sky in gold and rose. The forest stretched endlessly before them, peaceful and alive. For the first time, Lyra felt true freedom, not just from fear, but from the shadows that had stalked Kale and haunted the castle. Kale turned to her, his expression soft but steady. "You are mine, not by command, not by fear, but by choice," he said, "and I am yours." Lyra felt tears prick her eyes, but she smiled, knowing the depth of his words. The Alpha King, the ruler feared by all, had finally allowed himself to be vulnerable, to love, to trust, and to be redeemed. Together they returned to the castle, but the atmosphere was changed. The walls no longer whispered threats, the shadows no longer pressed close. The curse had been broken, and with it, the chains of fear that had bound Kale for generations. The kingdom began to notice the change in their ruler. Kale no longer ruled through fear alone. His bond with Lyra showed him capable of compassion, empathy, and love. Those who had once whispered about the cruel Alpha now spoke in awe of the strength he had found in trust and connection. Yet, even in this new dawn, Kale and Lyra knew the world was not without danger. Ancient forces still stirred in the shadows, and the forest had secrets that even the curse had not revealed. But together, they were ready for whatever came next, their bond unbreakable, their hearts united. One night as they stood on the castle balcony, watching the moon rise over the forest, Lyra leaned into Kale. "Do you think the forest will ever stop testing us?" she asked softly. Kale's eyes glimmered with silver light as he wrapped an arm around her. "Perhaps not," he said. "But it does not matter. Whatever comes, we face it together. That is our strength and our freedom." The moonlight reflected in their joined hands, a symbol of trust, courage, and the bond that had been forged in the fires of trials, shadows, and ancient curses. They had survived not because of power alone, but because of heart, compassion, and the courage to face the unknown together. And in that moment they were free, not just from the curse, not just from fear, but from the past that had threatened to define them. They were free to choose each other, to walk into the future side by side, and to meet whatever storms may come with unity and strength. The forest whispered, the kingdom breathed, and the night held its peace. The Alpha King had found redemption, the Omega had found courage, and together they had discovered the power of love that transcended fear, destiny, and even ancient curses. Kale looked down at Lyra, eyes full of unspoken promises. "No matter what waits in the shadows, I will never let you go," he said. Lyra smiled, feeling the warmth of his words, the safety of his presence, and the unshakable truth of their bond. "And I will never leave you," she replied. The wind stirred in the trees, carrying a faint whisper of the past, a reminder that while the curse was gone, the world would always hold mysteries, dangers, and trials. But for the first time, Kale and Lyra knew that together, they could face anything. And as dawn spread across the horizon, painting the kingdom in light, they walked forward, hand in hand, free at last. Not just from the curse, but free to be together, free to choose, and free to love without fear.